Hey boys and girls, Mr. McCauley here. Here's my presentation about sound that I showed you during our sound portion of Sound and Light. I just want to go over it. It really talks about what are the big ideas around sound. So what are the big ideas? It's kind of the same thing you've often heard teachers talk about. What are the learning goals? What are the things that are really important that we learn from this unit? And I identified 4. So first of all, sound is a form of energy. Sound is made up by vibrations. It's made by vibrations. Something has to vibrate for a sound to be made. Then that sound travels through a medium. You need some molecules of some sort to transfer the sound from one spot to another. And finally, sound, of course, is so important, but we do need to be careful around loud sounds. Okay, so let's start with the first one. Sound is a form of energy. You need to add energy to make the sound or the vibration. For example, with a tuning fork, you need to strike it on something. If you had a TV speaker, you need to make sure and plug that in and use electricity to cause the vibrations to be formed. And sound uses up that energy as it travels through the medium. For example, if you had a speaker and it started vibrating and making a sound, at first that sound might be quite loud, but as it travels through the air, the act of traveling through the air will cause the sound to slowly get lower and lower and lower until you can't hear it anymore. So sound loses energy as it travels, and that makes sense. If you're close to someone, it's easy to hear them. If they're far apart, it's harder to hear somebody. Okay, so number 2 is sound is made by vibrations. So what are vibrations? Vibration is when something moves back and forth in a pattern. And when something does do that, it disturbs the air, and the air also is disturbed in a certain pattern. Here's an example of a video that shows what it looks like when a tuning fork is vibrating. So what's happening? In air, normally the molecules are moving back and forth all the time. And when we strike a tuning fork, the tuning fork will move outwards, and that outwards motion will gather a lot of molecules, air molecules along the surface, and you'll get this kind of high pressure area. We call it a compression. And there's the compression. So as the tuning fork moves away, you've got another area where there's not very many molecules, and that area is a low pressure area, and that we call a rarefaction. That's a fancy word, but rarefaction. So you got high pressure and low pressure, and as you imagine, it goes back and forth again. You have a new compression area, a new high pressure area, and a low pressure area, and et cetera, et cetera. It goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and eventually you get this pattern of high pressure and low pressure, compressions and rarefactions. And what does that look like? If you look at on a graph, we usually make a sound wave go up and down, up and down. The top is where the compressions are, and that's called the crest. And the bottom of the sound wave is where the rarefactions are, where the low pressure is. It's kind of how it moves from one spot to the next. So let's talk about number 3. Sound travels through a medium. So in a vibration, it travels from one molecule to another. So you need to have the molecules there for the pattern to transfer. If you have no air, then you do not, even though you have a vibration, the air will not travel from one spot to another. And the closer the molecules are, the faster that sound travels. To see that, for example, air, the molecules are not that far, that close together. So it travels at about 343 meters per second. But in water, because the molecules are closer together, it's much, much greater. And finally, in steel, where you have the solid, the sound travels at 6,000 meters per second. So it's definitely closer. We also watched this video where we have a bell jar and we have an alarm inside there. You can hear it, but when they suck all the air out, you don't hear it anymore. So you definitely need a medium like air for sound to travel. Last one, we need to be careful around loud sounds. So people who work around a lot of loud sounds, they need to protect their hearing or they'll have hearing damage. And what do people do? They use either earplugs or protective headphones or something like that to protect themselves. So here's some jobs where people might have to have protection. Maybe like someone who works in construction, people who are going to a racetrack. A leaf blower is quite loud. And for kids, for you guys, the big concern really is if you do a lot of headphones. If you have a lot of headphones, you do a lot of listening to music, then that could be a problem. That's it. Good luck.